I can take iconography that people recognize from my country and I can reinterpret it and I can spin it around and make it work for me. So I'm really into remixing cultures. I always say, the big lesson in the Book of Life is it's really good to acknowledge where you're from, but that shouldn't define who you are.
Listening to Inside Acting, a podcast dedicated to demystifying the inner and outer game of success in the entertainment industry. I'm Trevor Algott.
And I'm AJ Meyer, and in episode 304, we have the third and final part of Jasmin and my interview with Jorge Gutierrez. In part 3, we talk about Jorge's visual artistic style, including how his relationship with his native country of Mexico influences his art, which then, of course, leads us to a conversation about the Pixar film Coco. Was all of the controversy warranted? Well, you'll get the behind-the-scenes version of what went down as these two movies came into being at almost the exact same time. Plus, Jorge turns the tables on us as interviewers in the final 2 questions. It's a beautiful ending to a beautiful interview. Stay with us.
Support for this episode of Inside Acting is brought to you in part by Rehearsal Pro, the current version of Rehearsal, the most awesomest version yet. It is an essential app for every actor to have in their toolbox. It's available right now inside the iOS app stores, so if you want to learn your lines, be off book for your auditions, quickly, reliably explore your character, make stronger, bolder choices, and do a bunch more cool stuff, go to rehearsal.pro/IAP right now, where you can learn all about the great new features in this newest version of Rehearsal, the groundbreaking essential app designed by actors, specifically for actors. That's rehearsal.pro/IAP.
Hey, Trev.
Hey man, I have to ask, what is, I sort of tangentially, peripherally know what the controversy around Coco was, but just right off the bat here, what exactly was the controversy for our listeners around Coco?
Oh, well, the sort of themes and not really the plot, but kind of the plot, mostly the themes of the Book of Life, which was Jorge's movie, and Coco are very similar. They're both movies that use Mexican folk art that take place around the Day of the Dead and the Day of the Dead sort of culture and holiday, etc. They both have a main protagonist hero who plays the guitar. I mean, there were all of these like things that, because people didn't know the exact plot or the exact ins and outs of the two films, they just immediately were like, oh, it's the same movie. Jorge talks about this in the interview. They were like crazy Pixar people, like Pixar fans, like rabid, devout Pixar fans who knew Coco was coming out and were accusing him of plagiarizing. And then after his movie came out and he had fans of his film, those people were like, oh, here comes Pixar, this big corporate, giant coming in to steal this like smaller sort of indie animated films ideas and make a bunch of money off of it. And none of it was, anyway, I don't want to give anything away. You'll hear about it in the interview. But in the age of the internet and social media, it was just a breeding ground of people just being ridiculous and like just chucking accusations at one another. I don't know how else to describe it. I mean, what else is the internet good for?
Right.
Besides
honestly,
the comments section.
80% of the traffic on the internet is people trolling each other.
Right.
Yeah, I kind of sort of knew about that, but I didn't really pay too much attention to it. But interesting, man. It doesn't happen a lot in the entertainment industry. Like, aren't there a lot of copycat movies? Like,
it reminds me of Big Magic, honestly.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Gilbert's book, 'cause she talks about like the muse going around, and it's possible for two people to be inspired by the same idea around the same time. And if you do believe in the zeitgeist, the greater consciousness, et cetera, then it makes a ton of sense, actually. And, she talks about like books that were, transferred from one person to another, like the idea for a book that was, transferred from one person to another. And then while you were talking, I thought of another example, and it's now gone out of my head. But yeah, there was, what was it? Armageddon and Deep Impact, right? Came out around the same time. And
and there were a slew of like volcano movies, and then there were like a slew of like, man-made disaster movies, like Titanic type, like the theme was like, look at this amazing feat that humans have, accomplished. And then it was, of course, everything goes awry. They're like, they come in waves, it seems.
Yeah.
So, I guess
it's
I'm not
true.
surprised. On this, I'm not surprised. It's interesting that, it's kind of like, it kind of proves in this sort of subjective way the idea of the 100th monkey. It's like that, but for humans with ideas for media.
Do you want to talk about the 100th monkey? I think we've talked about.
You were all quiet. I was like, right? Do I have this completely wrong? The 100th monkey, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, AJ, it's a really interesting thing, and you can look this up online on Wikipedia and various encyclopedias. There was I don't know, it was like around the 50s, I think, or maybe it was even earlier. But there were these two teams of scientists who were working on opposite sides of the planet, and they had no idea that they were both sort of doing this research, this similar research on different groups of primates. And around the same time, like within weeks or months of each other, they noticed that these primates started behaving in a completely new way. And I think they were like, they started digging in the ground with sticks in a very specific way, or they were washing some sort of like root tuber vegetables or something. They were washing them in a stream or something, but it was like a completely new behavior that these anthropologists and animal behavior specialists had never seen before. And it just started happening around the same time. And they both sort of documented like, hey, this is really odd. And when they sort of learned of each other's work, again, I hope I'm getting this right, but when they sort of learned of each other's work, they compared notes, and they were like, wow, it seems like that once a handful of, or they both observed this, I believe, in the groups of monkeys, that once a handful of these monkeys started behaving a certain way, and it was at about 100, then they all started behaving that way, even if they weren't in contact in any way, shape, or form on opposite sides of the planet. And so it was like, basically, on one side of the planet, 100 monkeys, give or take, started behaving this way, and then all of a sudden it was like there was a tipping point reached in the collective, consciousness or unconsciousness or whatever of these monkeys, and then they all started adopting this behavior, and nobody could explain it. It was just sort of this ethereal, psychic energy that sort of they all started doing. And I think that if you look around, if you really look closely at humanity, that happens all the time. There is this collective unconsciousness that we're tapped into, and we all sort of get swept up in the zeitgeist, and we can't explain it, but Napoleon Hill says it in Think and Grow Rich. Everybody's brain, every brain, animal, or I should say human or non-human, is a sending and receiving station. I mean, we send thoughts and we receive thoughts, and I think we're very often unaware of the thoughts that we receive and pick up as we walk around. But I kind of think that's how it works. So trippy.
Jasmin just got back from a conference in San Francisco called Wisdom 2.0. It's like a mindfulness conference. And one of the big themes this year that she brought back with her is quantum physics is beginning to prove scientifically, with like data and all this stuff to back it up, that we are all connected.
Oh, yeah.
And people who are like you and I, and like a little new agey, screw you, are already sort of tapped into that idea. But the difference now is there's data starting to back it up. And this one speaker that she saw said humanity will rise or fall on this idea. If we do not embrace it, that's it for us. If we do embrace it, we can figure it out, and we will survive and move forward into future millennia. But anyway, it's there's something there's something in the zeitgeist about the zeitgeist, Trevor.
Yeah, right.
It's very meta.
Yeah.
Trevor and I don't have a lot of news to discuss necessarily this week, unless I'm speaking out of turn, Trev. I want to speak for you, but we did get a really cool message from one of our longest supporters and listeners, Christina, and she wrote in. I love this. It gets me emotional just looking at it. She wrote in and said, basically, these are the top 10 things I learned from Inside Acting. So, again, not sure what's going to happen after Trev's departure, if we're just going to, close up shop or what. I know it's funny because we're getting a lot of thank you, Trevors, and we're also getting a couple people saying I hope AJ keeps going with it. I still don't know. No answer on that. But should we wrap things up? I love that Christina put this together. This is her list. The top 10 things I learned from Inside Acting. I thought maybe, Trev, you and I could just take turns kind of reading one off at a time.
Yeah, totally. Number 1, right up my alley. Read more.
Yeah, you should read that. Read more. Read more. That's it.
Amen. Not enough reading happening in the world.
Read more.
Yeah.
Number 2 is exercise more.
Mm-hmm. Number 3, care about the environment.
I love that we could help people know that, learn that. Number 4, care about unions.
Yeah, that's been a huge one for me over the years. The unions are such a blessing, and a lot of people have fought really hard, and we get to stand on their shoulders and enjoy the benefits of their labor. So, care about the unions, absolutely. Number 5, have an opinion about casting director workshops. In other words, know what you stand for. I love that it's about taking a moral stance and not compromising on your values just because you think you might get a lucky break.
I love that that's in her top 10.
Yeah.
The whole CD workshop thing. That's funny. I guess we did talk about it a lot. Number 6, be specific. Huge in acting and career goals in life. Be specific. In acting and career goals in life.
Yeah. And, I would add to that it doesn't necessarily need to be, quote unquote, the right choice. I think a lot of us get hung up, really speaking to myself here, but I get so hung up on not choosing a specific focus or a specific, direction because I don't want to make the wrong choice. But I'm learning that there really are no wrong choices, that there are just choices, and that we all have within us a lot of resources and adaptability, that we are built for survival, and no matter what we choose, we're going to be able to survive. We're going to make it work, regardless of whether it's the quote-unquote right or optimal choice for us at the time. So just choose something. Be specific and lean in that direction, and then, make adjustments along the way.
The biggest lesson I had in that was the Heather's. The decision of whether or not to go. I talked about this on the show before, but whether or not to go, it's like, oh, what's right? And finally, my bride-to-be was like, there is no right or wrong. There's just a choice, and then everything that happens after that.
Yeah.
And I was, hippie, huge.
So huge, yeah. And really, the choice is not the answer. The answer is how you respond to the adversity that inevitably follows.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
It's a trip. It's the simplest, most life-changing truth that I think I've come across yet in my years. Yeah. Number 7, do your own work. Make your own stuff. Make your own door for you to walk through. I think Mark Gant said that all the way back in the 20s, episode 27 or 28 or something like that. Make your own door so you can walk through that door, so you don't have to be knocking on somebody else's door.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge. Number 8, famous, infamous, working, not working, just starting out, or in the biz a long time. We are all one big family of artists. Yeah. Man, I love that. Yeah. I love that. Any small effort, any small drop in the bucket that we had to do with that, anybody believing that or seeing each other as a as a friend, as a family member, as opposed to a competition or whatever, I'm extremely proud of.
This reminds me of something my agent said to me at our very first meeting. And I'm going to try and not butcher this in the moment, but he said something along the lines of his philosophy being shake everybody's hand on the way up the ladder because you're going to be shaking everybody's hand on the way back down. And Tony Horton alluded to that. He said, getting to the top is hard. Staying there is even harder. And there's a lot of competition. Everybody wants to be successful, but it's at the end of the day, it's about, did you help somebody? Were you in service to the greater good of not only humanity, but other people's journeys? He talked about giving a lot of talks for free because he considers those training for the paid gigs. And I don't know, we are all one big family, and we owe it to ourselves to help each other out. When you impose lack on someone else, you're really only hurting yourself. So yeah, all one big family. Which leads nicely into number 9, be a good person all the time, everywhere, with everyone. To quote Steve Rohr, be a star wherever you are. All life it's all practice, man. So always be practicing.
Yeah. Be a good person. So simple. Yeah. So simple. Also, Christina, what's up? That's number 9. Read more is number 1. I don't think these are in any particular order. I'm giving her a hard time. I don't think she intended for be a good person to be below exercise more. Right. And finally, number 10, this is awesome. Knowledge bombs, which is in quotes. Knowledge bombs are the only good kind of bombs there are.
Boom. So, Christina, thank you for this epic top 10 list. This is absolutely beautiful. I've been grinning from ear to ear since the moment I saw it on Facebook, and it's a real honor to be able to share this on an episode, and thank you for your support and your ears over the years, and this was awesome. It's just warm fuzzies all over the place right now. Thank you so much for sharing this.
Beautiful.
Cool, man. Before we get into the interview, I just do see here in the outline that you had a meeting with a new commercial agent.
Yeah, it's same agency, but I don't know if I mentioned this on the show. We had a very strange stretch of time where the main agent that I was brought in initially to met with first and sort of, was the initial relationship that I had in that office left. He went to a different agency, which, it's the business. It happens all the time. Not a big deal. I still had auditions after that and before this new person came in, but they brought in someone new to replace him. And I had a meeting with her, and it was awesome. It was really chill. I just went in. My whole goal was to just, be myself. I didn't prepare anything. I didn't even know, I didn't even have any questions to ask. She even asked, she's like, do you have any questions for me? I'm like, no. I was like, do you have a business card? I didn't because my goal was to just go in and be myself. And it just went really well. And I put it in the outline because I wanted to, I guess the best term is thank. I wanted to thank our listeners for basically being around as you and I kind of explore everything, all different aspects of this industry, including authenticity. And, whenever I go into an audition these days or go into one of these meetings, I feel like I'm bringing the whole, speaking of the collective consciousness, I feel like I'm bringing the whole of our community and the whole of our, hundreds of guests into the room with me, because there is a wisdom and a knowledge and a comfort and an authenticity and a vulnerability that comes along with having had all of this experience, all of these conversations. And that wouldn't have been possible without our listeners, so that's why I put it in the outline. It's more of a thank you to our listeners, that it was one of the best meetings ever because it was just so comfortable, and we laughed and we had a good time and we hugged when I left. It was, I feel really good about having her there, and I know that that relationship is going to hopefully bear fruit in the commercial world. So
No doubt that it will, man. It's so cool to notice how we have just sort of slowly over the course of this podcast figured out that it's just about being yourself, and that is a skill set in its own right. Being yourself. I think when people say be yourself, it's kind of like, asshole, like, do you know how hard that is sometimes? Especially in this industry where, there's a lot riding on potentially meetings like this. But it's like, the older you get, the more you realize, like, look, honestly, opportunities are everywhere. And if I, do those top things that Christina outlined, there's going to be plenty more in the future. So it takes the pressure off, and you can just kind of chill out and not take everything so, intensely and seriously. And to quote Darren Petty, one of our past guests, you can start to really wear life like a loose garment. And that's really, I think, how to do it. That's how to do it in this industry, is just chill out, be in it for the long haul, listen to your intuition and just enjoy people. Forget everything else. Just be good to people and be good to yourself. Amen. All right, I'm done.
End the podcast right there. Of course, we want to hear from our sponsor, VO2GoGo.com. What is that? Well, it's the award-winning voiceover training system and winner of Backstage's Reader's Choice Award for Best VO Training 4 years in a row. That's all. No big deal. Visit VO2GoGo.com/start for a free Getting Started in Voiceover online class that'll help you add voiceover to your acting portfolio. That's VO2GoGo.com/start.
Awesome. All right. So here we go, man. Part 3 of your chat with Jorge, your and Jasmine's chat.
There's not much to say, guys. It just picks up right where the last one left off, and I was very sad to end this one, but hopefully someday we'll have Jorge back on the show.
And you talk about this too in things that I've read about what you've said about your own art, Jorge, but I've noticed that you really enjoy, this sort of mashup of the corporate icons with the Mexican folk art. You've got like Mickey Mouse and SpongeBob and The Simpsons and all these crazy, that kind of iconography in your art, all mashed up with, the Mexican folk art or the art that we would associate with the Day of the Dead. I feel like it's your sort of funny response to reconciling art with corporate culture, and I'm wondering how you manage to do that in your animation. In addition to your painting?
That's a really good question. I think it was because of the way I was raised. I was raised Catholic, so I got to see a lot of reinventing of iconography, especially religious iconography, and seeing different versions of the same thing. And then I got to see sort of bootleg culture. I got to see knockoffs of things, especially coming from the U.S. or Japan or Europe in Mexico, and I got to see the Mexican versions of those things and how people would make them their own. And so, for example, Bart, The Simpsons, I always tell the story. I saw Bart Sanchez T-shirts before I ever watched The Simpsons. So when I finally saw the cartoon, I kept waiting for Bart Sanchez to show up. Oh, my God. And he never did. And then, there's a famous American cartoon, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Mm-hmm. And the bad guy in that is Skeletor. So that was one of my earliest memories, is having a Skeletor toy and I thought he was a Mexican Day of the Dead superhero.
Wow.
Because it was like the buff guy with a skull head.
Yeah.
And eventually I see the cartoon, and it broke my heart that not only was he not Mexican, but he's a bad guy.
He's a bad guy.
Yeah.
Aww.
So this idea that wherever this thing comes from, that doesn't define what that is. What defines what that is what you do with it. And so I've loved that idea of Mexico. I can take iconography that people recognize from my country, and I can reinterpret it, and I can spin it around and make it work for me. So I'm really into remixing cultures. And with that comes, of course, a lot of responsibility. But at the same time, a lot of commentary can be made about certain things. And so what I try to do with my work is that reflect Mexican pop culture, but also folk culture, but also sort of acknowledge this idea that we can change what these things mean. I always say, the big lesson in Book of Life is it's really good to acknowledge where you're from, but that shouldn't define who you are.
Yeah, that's really wow. I'm actually taking that in today's current climate. You mentioned the hate mail, but that's sort of one of the best, most practical, down to earth, anti-nationalist sentiments that I've ever heard. It's because it's so simple. You can acknowledge where you're from, be proud of where you're from, but you don't have to let it define who you are. And right now, it's sort of sweeping the world, right? In the U.S., we had just had Brexit. In the U.K., you've got this, crazy dictator in the Philippines, and it's all about like national pride and pureness and that kind of thing. And obviously, your artwork is the opposite of that with all the mashups. But then what you just said, like you can be proud of where you're from and acknowledge where you're from, but it doesn't have to perpetually define who you are.
And I see it a lot in food and in music, where people seem to be mixing things. But I think it's taken a while on all the other arts to catch up with those ideas. And I think you're starting to see it, that a lot of times, where you're from becomes a crutch. And I think it should be your strength. But again, that can't be your character trait. It can't be, I do this because I'm Mexican. Like, I hate when people say stuff like that. It's like, no, you do this because you made that choice.
Yeah.
Right.
Don't put it on this other giant thing. Even though I just said, it's probably because I was raised Catholic.
Well, that's different. That's an association.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily basing it off of that. Well, I know we're running out of time, Jorge, and we have our final two questions that we always ask all of our guests. But I feel like I would be not doing my due diligence if I didn't ask you about your thoughts on Coco, because so many people, myself included, when I first saw the trailers for it, I was like, wait a second, that looks like, this, big behemoth that is Disney Pixar coming along and doing something that, these people did for $50 million, but doing it for probably much, much more money. And one of the things that I read recently online was, some articles coming out finally saying things like, stop pitting these two movies against one another and just, sort of live in the gratitude that we got two films made about Mexico, about the Day of the Dead. Like, let's celebrate that. So you have, I even found like a post that you posted on Twitter, like 5 years ago. Well, no, it was 4 years ago, something, like wishing them well. So I know that that's kind of how you feel, but I'm wondering if you could just speak briefly about, your sort of attachment to or experience with or philosophy on Coco.
Well, I'm like all animation people. I'm a huge fan of the Pixar movies. And I can honestly say that when I was working on, Book of Life and the news came out that Pixar was going to do a Day of the Dead movie, people in the crew freaked out. And I mean, we thought that was it for us. We thought that the news of them doing a movie with the subject matter was big enough to potentially have Fox say, you know what, we're not going to back this.
Wow.
And so to hear that your heroes are doing something on the subject matter was kind of shocking to me. We rallied, and it became something that sort of motivated us. And I think to some extent, it motivated Fox at that point to say, well, if Disney's willing to take a risk on this weird subject matter, then maybe we're onto something. And so it became a positive. Animation community is pretty small. So I have friends who were working at Pixar who couldn't tell me that they were working on it. And of course, the way these movies are done, it takes 4 or 5 years to make them.
Yeah.
And so it was like running a marathon, but knowing the Terminator
Was waiting for you at the finish line.
with Buzz Lightyear's head was running behind. And so as time went by, and I remember thinking, I can't make this us versus them. This has to be a friendly thing. And so I went out of my way to not say anything and not sort of try to start anything. But the press really wanted that versus thing, right?
Yeah.
Book of Life comes out, and I would get asked all the time, hey, how do you feel about the Pixar movie coming? And I stayed pretty neutral with that stuff. After the movie came out, the director of Coco, who at that point I had never met, now we're friends, wrote me on Twitter and just congratulated me. And from that point forward, I was like, this is a sign. And I told them, we have to meet. We are now going to be linked forever. And so, the Coco trailer comes out, all this hate stuff starts coming. I basically started getting attacked by Pixar people. Pixar fans who are very red said, you stole the idea for Coco, and you rushed out your movie to beat them. That was the narrative.
Oh, my gosh.
And so he had to say something about that, how that wasn't the case. And at some point, it hit me. This is all great for drama, especially for Twitter and the clickbait audience.
Yeah.
But we can't let that get in the way of the fact that they're making a movie about celebrating Mexican culture. And I will applaud that till I die, anybody who's willing to take that risk. Because this is not a guaranteed hit. I mean, now Coco did really well, so it looks like it was a risk. That was a really risky thing for those guys, too. So Book of Life comes out. It did okay. It made $100 million. I think they expected a lot more. We did not do well in the middle of the country. Basically, wherever Donald Trump won, that's where we did terrible.
Oh, I'm so surprised.
Yeah, surprised, right? And we would get hate mail. We would literally get letters saying, why would I watch a movie about Mark Gardner? Why
wow.
would it be about them?
Why
Like
would you
them.
Who has time to write that letter?
Right.
God.
So,
I
and
feel so bad for them.
we did really well in Latin America. We did really well in certain parts of Europe. But there, we didn't do well in certain countries. And so as time went by, again, the narrative kept coming. Coco versus Book of Life. Coco versus Book of Life. And finally it got to the point where I just had to explain to everyone, okay, guys, regardless of what everybody thinks, what's at stake here? If Coco doesn't do well, what happens? That means Hollywood goes, I told you, don't make movies about Latin topics. Don't make movies with people of color being the main characters. Don't make movies that deal with this subject matter. It's like if Wonder Woman didn't do well. Hollywood would go, no more female superheroes, no more female directors. That's what's in a movie like this.
Yeah.
So I make movies that deal with the subject matter, and I am a minority director. So I need Coco to do really well.
Right.
Yeah.
So aside from my friends working on it, and aside from how kind Lee Unkrich, the director, had been, it's in my best interest to have a movie like that do well.
Yeah.
I have to think of the bigger picture.
Yeah. That's such a great way to look at it, too, because we definitely have a, all boats rise with the tide attitude on the show. So That's such a beautiful way to look at it at a more macro level. Like it costs us pennies by comparison to what a feature film like that costs to produce this podcast. So I'm glad to see that even with that amount of money, there's still good people like yourself and this other director who have that attitude. Like we can all sort of win here. Cool. So we always ask these two questions of our guests and get very interesting answers. The first one is, do you feel like this industry, this life as an artist, chose you, or did you choose it?
It's very interesting. That's a great question. When I was a little kid, I remember making a deal with myself where I said, I'm not going to grow up. I'm going to stay a kid forever. And now, I'm a 42-year-old guy. I still feel that kid's in control. Like I'm basically a giant robot for that little kid. So I think I had no choice. I think I was born into this. My wife jokes that, one of these days you're going to have to get a job doing something that's a grown-up job because you get to be a professional child. And I love it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Jorge. You tell Sandra we said don't do it.
But that's a great question. Wow, I never thought about it. What about you guys? How do you guys feel about that?
I've only been asked it once, and it was because I was a guest on someone else's podcast who actually was inspired by our podcast. And I said that I think that it chose me, but that because of the nature of art and how challenging it is to live a life as an artist, you have to wake up every day and continue to choose it, which is what I find myself doing. That was my answer. Have you ever answered that question, honey?
Yeah, what about you, Jasmin?
I don't know. I don't think I have. But my answer would be that it chose me. I was a dancer and have been a dancer my whole life, and I feel like that's sort of my primary artistic drive. And that's something that literally lives in your cells. So I didn't choose that. It just lives in me. But I definitely agree with the choosing it, because there's some days where I don't choose it. Or I want to choose something else. But yeah, I like that question too. The second question is, if you could boil down all of your experience and wisdom and learned lessons into one nugget of advice for our listeners, what would that nugget of advice be?
Okay, the nugget would be, and it's food-based because I love food. Okay, here it goes.
Yeah.
The tacos of success are dripping with the salsa of failure.
Yes.
Ooh. Yes. Oh man, I'm inspired and hungry at the same time.
Yeah, we're going to have tacos for dinner.
You cannot have one without the other, and failure will make the success more delicious.
Damn.
Beautiful.
Yo, mic drop. We're going to put in a little, exploding sound right here, Jorge. Oh, wow. So good. Jorge, you're one of those people, you're one of those guests where we get to the end of the interview and I feel like, man, I wish we could just talk to this person for hours on end.
Thank you guys.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
So appreciate it.
So appreciate it. Can't wait to get this out to our community. It's been really inspiring to talk to you. I can't wait for that in-person meeting someday. And
we'll book lots of meetings with you and watch you drive away.
yeah, I can't wait to meet you 16 times from the first time we planned meeting. And I'm so looking forward to whatever you have in the works and whatever's coming next for you.
Lego, maybe.
Oh yeah, what is this Lego thing?
Maybe,
I want to know about. Yeah,
maybe?
I want to know about this.
I can't say too much about it, but I am a Lego movie.
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Okay, so here we always want to give the guests an opportunity to sort of plug themselves. So if people want to find out more about you, you mentioned you're on Twitter at Mexopolis. How else can folks find out more about you and Sandra, what you guys are up to, what Mexopolis is up to, etc.?
Pretty much Mexopolis on Twitter, or go to our website, mexopolis.com. And also, I just did a virtual reality short for Google. And so if you go online, you can it's in my Twitter, you can find it, and it's free. Anybody can experience it. It's 8 minutes long. And then I'm currently directing a Lego movie that will hopefully come out in 2020. So here we are.
Oh my gosh!
Well,
we'll have you back on.
That's when, yeah, exactly. That's when we'll have you back on. You come back on as part of your press junket for the Lego movie. And what is the VR thing? Is Son of Jaguar?
Son of Jaguar.
All right,
yeah.
Awesome. So
you can watch it without the goggles.
Yeah, you can now watch it on your computer.
Okay.
All right. Awesome. So Mexopolis.com, all of that stuff will be linked to on our website, InsideActing.net. But thank you again so much, Jorge, and we wish you all the continued success. And thanks for sharing
salsa.
And salsa. And success in salsa. Tacos and salsa. And thank you again for sharing your inspiring story with us.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It was a blast, and now I'm hungry too. I feel like we should all go get tacos now.
Hey everybody, welcome back. I love the quote you put in the outline here, AJ. The tacos of success are dripping with the salsa of failure.
That was his nugget.
Oh, it's so good. So good.
Jasmin and I went out either that night or the night after for tacos and took a picture and sent it to him or posted it online and tagged him in it, and he immediately liked it and was like, yes.
Oh, so that's awesome.
Such a cool interview. He's such generous person, and you can really tell he cares about not just his art, but like you said, Trev, people. He cares about people, and he cares about the work that he is doing, and you can tell it just exudes out of him. So someday maybe we'll get a chance to talk to him again. You never know.
All right. What's your pick of the week?
So my pick of the week is a movie that was watched. I'm terrible at grammar. On Valentine's Day. So it's a romantic comedy called What If, starring Daniel Radcliffe and Zoe Kazan. It was really, really good. So well written. Adam Driver's in it as well. Like he plays his character is fantastic. There's a quote in the trailer, if you watch the trailer, that is really funny, and I was like, oh man, they put like the funniest line in the trailer. I hate when comedies do that. It's not the case, and actually in that same scene he goes on to say something right afterwards that's even funnier. So it's a very strongly written screenplay. We really, really enjoyed it, and I looked up the screenwriter to see if he'd done anything else, and he really hasn't, and I'm so confused. I'm like, how does this happen? Like he won all these awards, these like screenwriting awards, and then he had this film made, and then seemingly no action after that. And I actually brought it up to Ben one night. I went over to Ben Whitehair's apartment to put something on tape or something like that, and I mentioned this to him, and he said, sometimes there can be somebody working as a writer and they're working nonstop, either, whatever, they're punching up scripts, they're doing something, they're working nonstop. But for whatever reason, for one reason or another, they aren't working on like their own screenplays, their own stuff, something that would end up a credit on IMDb. So it looks like they're not working to someone who's like sort of outside of their circle. I hope that's what's going on with this guy, just because I hope he is still working, because it was just so good. Just a really, really well written romantic comedy based on a play, which is crazy because when you watch it, like there's some international stuff in there, like it goes kind of all over the world, and I'm like, how did they stage this? When they staged it, but sometimes romantic comedies can be kind of saccharine or melodramatic or whatever, and this one was just like, I don't know, just the way that they did it, the writing, the acting, everything. It was very believable. I really enjoyed it. So that's it. What If? Check it out. Good movie. Is on something, Netflix or something.
Yeah, definitely on Amazon Prime. I can see.
There you go.
I like good movies that are based on plays. That's always has a little nice spot in my heart.
What is your pick of the week?
My pick of the week is a book called The Spender's Guide to Debt-Free Living. It's by a blogger named Anna Newell-Jones. Her website is andthenwesaved.com. And this book, The Spender's Guide to Debt-Free Living, is a book that I actually picked up from Faye Wolf, another long ago podcast guest. She posted about this book on Instagram right around the end of the year, right during the holidays. And she had said how she had read this book over the course of the past year and had implemented a lot of what she learned. And the big thing is what she calls a spending rest, or a shopping ban of some kind. And these are sort of like a thing in the news now these days. A lot of people are saying, I'm going to go cold turkey and not buy anything but necessities for X amount of time. Some people do a day, some do a weekend, some do a whole week, some do months, some do a full year. And I read a lot of personal finance blogs, so I'm sort of familiar with the concept, but I never thought it was something I needed to do. And I read this book, and we talked about this last episode, AJ, but I had to cut a lot of it. I think almost all the talk on our debt repayment strategies. I had to cut all that for time. But you and I are both on our own journey of repaying our debt and building a secure financial future for ourselves. And for me, when I went back through my finances, I saw a lot of opportunity to trim the fat. And I dug back into a lot of the YNAB webinars, the free trainings that YNAB offers, and I took a lot of what I learned in this book, and I created a really sort of, I don't want to say strict, but exacting budget for myself, and I just made the commitment. I was like, you know what? This year, I am going to just put 100% of my focus, as far as finances go, on paying down my debt. So that, number one, means living a very sort of rigorous existence when it comes to where I spend my money, which is, as we've talked about on this show before, your money is really just your life energy, just represented in a different form. So I'm going to be very rigorous about where I put that, with the focus on digging myself out of a hole of credit card debt, as many people in the U.S. at least are familiar with, and then secondly, increasing my income and just really just getting out from under this rock of honestly, it's like slavery. It's what it feels like a lot of the time when you've just got all this money you owe to these other people, and every month the bill is due. And I don't like that. I don't like that anymore. I'm old enough to be like, no, I'm over this. I don't want to be a slave to anybody. This book was a revelation for me. It's very sort of simple. It's definitely written for a female audience, but I got a lot out of it. Again, it's called The Spender's Guide to Debt-Free Living. There's a link to that on our website in the show notes, along with a link to this film that AJ watched on Valentine's Day called What If? And then lastly, we have a listener pick from Jasmin, which is very timely. This is sort of a piggybacking on what we talked about a lot at the beginning of the last episode. Do you want to talk about this, AJ?
Obviously, we mentioned the school shooting last week, and Jasmin, she was listening in, and I was sort of grappling with, what do we do? And she learned about this website through Amy Schumer, who has been a big advocate for gun control and safety, particularly after the Aurora shooting happened during a screening of one of her films. It's called everytown.org, and it's a great sort of jumping off point in terms of learning what you can do. Like I said last week, one of the challenges is feeling so helpless in the face of these tragedies, and it gives you a nice place to get started. There's lots of different ways to get involved, and this website makes for a good sort of amalgamation of those things. Read about the issue. You can look at data. You can get involved in find out how you can get involved in your area, join their mailing list, etc. So just a great follow up to our conversation from last week. So that'll be on. I think you put it in the. Did you put it in the show notes last week? The link itself?
No.
Okay, so it'll be in the show notes from this week, but it's everytown.org.
Yeah, I've seen more than a few celebrities share this on their social media feeds in the past couple weeks here. And I'm looking at the website, and it's a very sharp website. And right there, front and center, front page, it says, an action plan to kick out lawmakers beholden to the gun lobby. And if you click through some of these header graphics, it talks about resources they have to find out how much money our elected officials have accepted from the NRA to keep a lot of these gun laws lax. And then different sort of statistics and whatnot for things like suicide and how many homicides there have been throughout the years and where, and what the different gun laws mean by state. It looks like a really, sadly, necessary resource. So,
yeah.
Everytown.org. All right, link on our website along with everything else. That's it, I think, for this episode, yeah?
Yeah.
Right.
Let's roll out.
Let's boogie. So today's episode, guys, thank you for listening. It was produced and hosted by us, Trevor Algatt and AJ Meyer. The team also includes Jen Levin and Grace Gordon.
Visit us online at insideacting.net to sign up for our weekly email dispatch and listen to all of our episodes. We're, of course, also on social media and pretty much wherever else you get your podcasts.
And if you guys would like, you can continue to support the production of Inside Acting with either a one-time financial contribution or an ongoing monthly contribution. As we've said earlier in this episode and last episode, we're not 100% sure what the future of the podcast is going to be, but you can help keep the feed online as a resource for people all over the world to navigate this industry a little bit more smoothly. So if you'd like to help us do that, pay it forward, contribute to the community, even just a couple bucks will keep us online for at least another month or so. So if we get, 100 of those, bam, this thing could be up for a good chunk of time helping people out all over the world. So just visit us at insideacting.net to learn more. If you've gotten value from this podcast at all over the years, now's the time to let us know. Insideacting.net to make your contribution. Thank you very much.
And that's it for episode 304. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. And in the meantime, it's taco time.
Yeah. I want some failure salsa on mine.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Taco time sounds good to me, man.
God. All right. Let me do it again then.